2008, and serves on the Senate Banking, Budget, Commerce, and Intelligence Committees. After more than 4 years in the Senate, Senator Warner has established himself as a national leader in efforts to find bipartisan consensus to create balanced solutions to reduce the federal debt and deficit. He has also
haven't exactly got that.
A work in progress, right, Deborah? Welcome. He also has been a champion, as we know, for our military men and women, their families, and our military veterans. Senator Warner is also a leader in Congress with efforts to promote private sector innovation and to help our nation's small businesses and our startup companies to succeed. From 2002 to 2006, Senator Warner served as our governor of Virginia, where he worked on another bipartisan way to turn record budget deficits into surpluses. Governor Warner also focused on improving public education, expanding economic opportunity in every region of our state. He recruited 135,000 new jobs to Virginia during his 4-year term. When Governor Warner left office in 2006, Virginia was ranked as the nation's best managed state, best state for business, and the state offering the best educational opportunities to our young people. Before entering public office, Senator Warner was an early investor in the cellular, all of you hold up your phones, cellular telephone business. And as he's always said, you can leave him on in any meeting that he conducts. I'm going to tell you that before he does. He also co-founded the company that became Nextel and ultimately invested in many hundreds of startup technology companies that really created tens of thousands of private sector jobs. Senator Warner and his wife Lisa Collis and their 3 daughters live in Alexandria, Virginia. Senator Warner, welcome to Hurrah.
Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you for that introduction. What Pat left out, 2 things she left out. One was that I got down Hampton Roads last night and was with a group of folks eating dinner at Salt. And who walks in? But Pat and her whole family. Pat is a relatively new grandmother. I don't know if everybody knows that. So you've all seen the pictures? Well, she's got one more now to add because there's a picture of her grandchild being kissed by a politician. And you know, she also did make, she jumped the gun on me on my cell phone joke, but now that I'm just a poor federal employee, not only leave them on, but call each other. You hear an annoying sound, I hear cha-ching. So I do really appreciate everybody coming out this morning. I know you've heard a couple weeks before Labor Day is a challenging time to get out. And you know, the subject this morning is going to be housing finance reform, but on Hampton Roads, and anybody want to ask about sequestration or any other subject, I'd be happy to kind of give you my 2 cents on that as well. This is the first of a series of these events I'm going to have around Virginia, because I want to hear from you, whether you're on the realtor side or the banking side or the credit union side or advocates for low-income housing, because I think this legislation I'm going to talk about in a moment, we actually may have one, Pat, that we can actually get something done on, you know, as opposed to just talking about, which is too much of what happens in Washington. And let me also preface my comments by saying, I saw Bill Bartell yesterday, we were up in William and Mary doing something with veterans, but this housing finance stuff is pretty complicated. You know, I spent 20 years around the markets, and when I first got elected, you know, the bottom was falling out, and we're not sure whether, you know, the whole stock market was going to collapse, and what was American capitalism going to look like, and we were working on what was then became the Dodd-Frank bill, and I'll remember early on, tell a quick story, I'd been, you know, just a senator for like a month or two, and I was on the banking committee. And you know, I had some experience. I could read a balance sheet. I had a business background, and I guess I asked a couple of good questions on one of these hearings, and a couple of these senators, Democrat and Republican, came up to me and said, gosh, Warner, you really get this stuff. And, you know, kind of for a moment I pumped up and said, well, that's really cool. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I know a little bit, but not enough to rewrite the rules for the whole financial system. And in effect, that's what we were doing with Dodd-Frank. And the one piece, though, that we absolutely did not touch, and it was conscious, in fact, we got criticized for it, but the one thing we didn't touch was housing finance, which in many ways was at least one of the major problems of how we got into the problem in the first place. And I also preface this by saying, you know, I thought, I started working on this over a year ago, I thought that, you know, I knew a little bit about housing finance again, but the complexities of the kind of plumbing of how our housing finance system works or doesn't work is pretty overwhelming. And I think, again, we've got a pretty good starting point here. May not be perfect, but I want to tell you about it. And again, since this is one of the first ones where I've kind of talked about it, and how many of y'all are realtors in the room? How many are all kind of on the banking finance side? Credit side. If you financing side, how about that? So, how many on the kind of low, you know, affordable housing, low income housing side? Okay. So, and that's a great cross section. Did I miss any kind of group? Builders. How many on the builders side? Yeah, all right, good. You know, so I don't want to get. Tell me if I'm going into too much. I don't want to go into too much detail on some of this stuff, but it's. Yeah, you guys are kind of the guinea pigs on the first round of this. By the time I do it in Roanoke, Northern Virginia, and Richmond, it'll maybe be a little smoother. Let's kind of back up, and at least my 2 cents of kind of how we got here. Let's. You know, housing finance was a pretty stable area of the economy for 30, 40 plus years. As we all know, you know, Fannie and Freddie used to control between 40 and 60% of the market in terms of securitizing them. One of the strengths of our system has been, you know, if we're going to have a liquid housing market, you know, you've got to be able to create a package of mortgages that you can, whether a bank or a credit union or any other financing institution, can package up and sell off so the bank or the credit union or whatever don't have to keep this real estate on their books and they can keep circulating the money. The system worked really well until we all know, you know, some of our friends on Wall Street got a little too cute by half and started saying, let's see how exotically we can slice and dice these packages of mortgages and create all these new financial tools, credit default swaps and this and that and the other, that would break up the risk and sell it off to different sets of investors. And Fannie and Freddie, and if you go back again with the history of these institutions, you know, they had always been a little bit kind of weirdly defined because they were public companies that were supposed to securitize all these mortgages. But and if you think back about it, it's kind of hard. I think it kind of evolved over time, and there may be experts in the room working on this, but the idea that we were going to have a public company that also had a public purpose, you know, we're going to give you some kind of implicit government guarantee, and the value of that implicit government guarantee is going to be, you got to also go out there and promote low-income housing and fair housing goals inside a public company where you're supposed to also make money for shareholders. Ended up creating something that, I think if we had looked back maybe years ago, we said, how do you do this in the right way? And as these companies tried to make more and more money, and remember Fannie and Freddie back in the 2002, 2004, 2005 timeframe, they were making money hand over fist. But then what happened is the things started going down, their ability to backstop these mortgages because they generally hadn't been doing very good underwriting. They didn't have the resources and the assets behind themselves to back the mortgages. And we were suddenly stuck with the circumstance of Do we allow these companies to go down, which potentially could have collapsed the whole housing market even worse than it was? Or do we, the American taxpayer, come in and buck them up? And what happened was, and I think it was the right decision, and it started under President Bush, but I think it was absolutely the right decision. We basically said, we can't let these go down, and so the federal government came in and basically took them over. And the American taxpayer at this point is $188 billion in the hole to a bucked up Fannie and Freddie. Now let me get into one level down of detail that is important, not so much on the legislation I'm talking about, but it's going to be important because of, you know, the various paths that are potentially out there on how we solve this problem. When Fannie and Freddie were going down the tubes, and this is again something I didn't understand until recently, they were so bankrupt that in any normal business circumstance, if we'd been the normal creditor, or if we'd been a normal bank or credit union, we would have kind of basically wiped out all the shareholders and taken over the whole asset. But what the federal government did was they didn't take over the whole asset. They basically took over the companies, but only took over 80% of the asset and left the shareholders with a 20% portion. And the reason why they left the shareholders with a 20% portion, again, this is way too much detail, but it is important, was not because they wanted to, oh gosh, this would be great, you know, we want to think these shareholders ought to still have some value down the line.